Сейчас у нас на
связи
Рафал Панковский, руководитель Центра мониторинга Восточной Европы, Ассоциации Never Again.
The Never Again Association East Europe Monitoring Center from Poland. Dr. Rafal Pankowski, the Polish sociologist and politologist, and Dean of Collegium Warsaw, and the head of Never Again Association and the deputy editor of Never Again magazine.
Давайте вышвырнем расизм и антисемитизм с наших стадионов. Опыт ассоциации никогда больше.
Let's kick out racism and anti-Semitism from our stadiums. He will share the experience of his association.
Ja żałuję już, to nie
I'm sorry that I was not able to come to Moscow, my favorite city, and I do hope that next time we'll be able to meet in person.
Now I would like to benefit from the translation. I am going to continue in English. And before I move on to the topics of sports and football in particular, I just wanted to note that the current pandemic situation in our region, Eastern Europe, is very much related to our topic, to conspiracy theories about vaccinations, which in turn is strongly related to anti-Semitism. And we have documented it recently with our partners in frames of the project Get the Trolls Out. The report is coming out next week. And in this context, I very much hope that footballers can play a bigger role in promoting vaccination and combating those conspiracy theories on social media and elsewhere. Well, paradoxically, over the last 2 years, statistically speaking, the number of anti-Semitic and racist incidents in football internationally has decreased. But the reason is simple. Many games were cancelled. Many games were played without the presence of supporters. So there was less room, less opportunities for racist and anti-Semitic manifestations. But when the supporters were allowed back into many stadiums, unfortunately, the issues of racism, xenophobia, and anti-Semitism also came back. So in Poland, for example, in many stadiums in our country, we have seen banners with the portrait of Janusz Waluś. Janusz Waluś is a Polish-born racist killer who is serving a life sentence in South Africa for murdering Chris Hani, who was Nelson Mandela's friend and comrade and the leader of the Communist Party of South Africa, who was killed by Waluś in 1993. But incidences of xenophobia and anti-Semitism related to football also happen outside of the football stadium. So, for example, just a few weeks ago, together with our colleagues at the FAIR Network, Football Against Racism in Europe, that was already mentioned today, we organized a debate about anti-Semitism in Polish and European football. And after this debate, we received a letter from a well-known Polish referee, Mr. Araszkiewicz. The name is well known because also his father had been a brilliant player on the Polish national team in the late 80s and early 90s. So I remember that well. And Mr. Araszkiewicz sent us a message full of anti-Semitic invective that I don't think I need to quote here because I think we all know what anti-Semitic invective looks like. We are still waiting for reactions from the Polish Football Association as well as FIFA. But it very much shows that the problem of anti-Semitism in the world of football still exists. So I believe it is very important to continue monitoring and documenting such incidents. It is important to react to those incidents on many different levels. I think all too often organizations such as the Never Again Association or the SOVA Center in Russia are labeled as traitors or foreign agents just because we want to highlight such incidents. But this work is necessary and it is important. But we all know that anti-Semitism was not invented in the football stadium. Of course, it reflects wider social issues. What happens in football must not be seen in isolation to broader social problems. But I strongly believe that football can and should play a positive role, and that is why I really like the second part of the title of this session. Often we discuss issues of intolerance in football in negative terms, but football can play a positive role. It can be a positive platform for promotion of values, values of fair play, of respect and tolerance. And since the late 1990s, the Never Again Association has accumulated a lot of experience. Our campaign, Let's Kick Racism Out of the Stadiums, was initiated by the late Marcin Kornak, the founder of the Never Again Association. And I could list many positive experiences over the years, but I just wanted to answer directly to the question, important question posed by our moderator. I do believe that the Black Lives Matter movement in football has been one of those positive initiatives. I think one of the important aspects of that initiative is that it really comes from the milieu of the players themselves. And I think it is a very valuable expression of solidarity with the victims of racism. And I actually regret there was so much pressure on Polish players on the level of the national team not to join this initiative. The pressure from the then chairman of the Polish Football Association, Zbigniew Boniek, who is still vice president of UEFA, who has a very problematic record of many statements which you could call xenophobic, sexist, and homophobic. But I promised to mention some more positive items. One of those examples would be the European Football Championships in 2012 in Poland and Ukraine, when in partnership with UEFA, we conducted a large-scale educational program under the title Respect Diversity, Football Unites. We remember, unfortunately, this large-scale fight between Polish and Russian supporters happened outside of the National Stadium in Warsaw. But with this one significant exception, the tournament was overall a positive experience, and it contributed a lot to the promotion of positive values. We are also proud to have been involved in preparations for the 2018 World Cup in Russia with our partners from the United Nations Office for Human Rights, the Russian Jewish Congress. Of course, Alexei Smirtin played a big role then. And I very much hope that the legacy of this event can have a long-term positive impact on the football culture in Russia and elsewhere. But we also have examples of grassroots positive initiatives. For example, the annual anti-racist football tournament at the Polish Woodstock Festival, which is the biggest music festival in Europe, and every year the Never Again Association is present there with a positive message of respect for diversity. And my final point that I wanted to mention is the history of football as a resource, as a positive resource, and especially Jewish history. One of the biggest successes we have had in our activity in the last years was the publication of a book about the history of Cracovia, the oldest football club in Poland, which had many Jewish players and activists and supporters in the period before the Holocaust. I think it is important and symbolic and little known that the current national stadium in Warsaw is located on the site of the former Maccabi Stadium. It is another little known fact that a Jewish player, Józef Klotz, scored the first ever goal for the Polish national team in a game against Hungary in 1921. And Józef Klotz later perished as a victim of the Holocaust in the Warsaw Ghetto. So I think I should stop now because I realize time is flying. But I would like to stress that the Never Again Association is very open to cooperation against anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, intolerance in football and outside of football. And I invite you to cooperate with the Never Again Association. And once again, thank you for organizing this session and this conference. Спасибо большое.